Hello, guys. The shackles around James Harold Kinley's wrists clinked like wind chimes as he shuffled into courtroom 7B, his head bowed so low that his tangled gray beard nearly touched his chest. The prosecution's opening statement cut through the stale air, like a blade. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is a violent vagrant who attacked an innocent business owner, a 73-year-old man whose only crime was asking this defendant to move away from his storefront. Assistant District Attorney Miranda Wells gestured dramatically toward the defendant's table, where James sat motionless in his faded army jacket, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. The evidence will show that Mr. Kinley broke the victim's arm in an unprovoked assault, terrorizing not just Mr. Washington but the entire neighborhood. Judge Patricia Morrison shuffled through the case files with visible irritation. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just a few court watchers, a bored bailiff, and James's court-appointed attorney, a 26-year-old public defender named Marcus, Chen, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Your Honor. Chen stood awkwardly, tugging at his too long tie. My client maintains his innocence and— Save it for your opening, counselor. Judge Morrison snapped. She'd seen 1,000 cases like this. Homeless defendants cycling through the system like laundry. Let's get the preliminaries out of the way. State the defendant's full name for the record. Chen glanced at his notes. James Harold Kinley, Your Honor. The judge's pen froze mid-stroke. She looked up sharply, her brown eyes suddenly alert. Did you say James Harold Kinley? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison stared at the defendant, who hadn't raised his head once since entering the courtroom. Sergeant James Kinley of the 173rd Airborne? The sound of papers hitting the floor echoed through the courtroom as Bailiff Rodriguez dropped his clipboard. In the gallery, an elderly man in a Veterans of Foreign Wars cap slowly rose to his feet, his weathered hands gripping the back of the pew in front of him. James finally lifted his head, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds, eyes that had seen too much, carried too much, lost too much. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Jesus Christ, whispered Officer Danny Reeves from the back of the courtroom. He stood up, his police uniform crisp and pressed, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. That's him. That's the guy who pulled me out of that IED blast in Kandahar 2009. Took on 6 Taliban fighters by himself to get to me. Judge Morrison slowly rose from her bench, her black robes rustling like wings. One by one, others in the courtroom began to stand. A security guard with Marine tattoos peeking from his sleeves, a court reporter whose son had served in Afghanistan, even Ada Wells's assistant prosecutor, whose brother had been in the 173rd. Mr. Kinley. Judge Morrison's voice had lost all its earlier irritation, replaced by something that sounded dangerously close to reverence. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? James's voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper, rough from disuse and damaged by too many cigarettes and cold nights. Because in the Army, ma'am, they taught us that honor isn't something you announce. It's something you do, every day, without expecting applause. The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. A.D. Wells cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden shift in the room's energy. Your Honor, while we all respect Mr. Kinley's service, that doesn't change the fact that he assaulted an elderly man. Allegedly assaulted, Chen interjected, finding his voice for the first time. The victim's medical records show a fractured radius and ulna, Wells continued. Mr. Washington was hospitalized for 3 days. This isn't a case we can dismiss based on past heroics. Judge Morrison nodded reluctantly. The prosecution is correct. We need to hear from the victim. Bailiff, please call Mr. Samuel Washington to the stand. The courtroom door opened with a groan, and an elderly African-American man entered, his left arm in a sling, his steps careful and measured. Samuel Washington wore his Sunday best, a navy suit that had seen better decades, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He avoided looking at James as he made his way to the witness stand. Mr. Washington, Wells began after he was sworn in, please tell the court what happened on the morning of October 15th. Washington's voice shook slightly. I was opening my store, Washington's Corner Market on Elm Street. It was about 6 a.m. And this man, he pointed at James without meeting his eyes, was sleeping in my doorway. I asked him politely to move along, told him I had customers coming and it wasn't good for business. And then what happened? He got angry, started shouting about how he had rights, how he'd served his country. I told him I served two tours in Vietnam, and that didn't give me the right to make other people's lives difficult. Washington's voice grew stronger, more confident. Then he grabbed my arm and twisted it until I heard it snap. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Several of the standing veterans shifted uncomfortably, their hero worship suddenly complicated by the stark testimony. No further questions, Wells said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Chen approached the witness stand like a man walking to his execution. Mr. Washington, you said Mr. Kinley was angry? Very angry. And he was shouting? Yes. What exactly was he shouting about his service? Washington paused, his brow furrowing. He said something about Afghanistan, about losing his team. But I couldn't make out all of it. He was slurring his words. Was he intoxicated? I assumed so. Most of them are. Chen nodded. Mr. Washington, in your statement to police, you mentioned that Mr. Kinley grabbed your arm. Can you demonstrate how he grabbed it? Washington hesitated, then reached across his body with his good arm. Like this, I think. It happened so fast. So he grabbed your left arm with his right hand? Yes, I believe so. Chen glanced at his notes. Mr. Washington, the medical report indicates that your left radius and ulna were fractured. That's the bones in your forearm. For someone to break those bones by grabbing your arm, they would need to apply tremendous force. More than a simple grab or twist. Are you certain that's all that happened? Wells stood up. Objection. The witness has already testified to the events. Overruled, Judge Morrison said quietly. Answer the question, Mr. Washington. The old man's composure began to crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the courtroom's chill. It all happened so fast I was scared. When you're my age and someone that size comes at you. Mr. Washington, Chen pressed gently. Is there anything else about that morning that you haven't told us? The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Washington looked around the courtroom, his eyes finally landing on James, who sat perfectly still, his storm cloud eyes fixed on his shackled hands. There were other men, Washington whispered. The courtroom erupted. Wells shot to her feet. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of— Quiet! Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Washington, what other men? Washington's voice broke. 3 of them. Young guys, maybe 19, 20. They came up behind me while I was talking to Mr. Kinley. One of them had a knife. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. They wanted the money from my register, my wallet, everything. The courtroom held its collective breath. Mr. Kinley, he didn't attack me. He protected me. When that boy with the knife lunged at me, Mr. Kinley grabbed my arm and pulled me behind him. That's when my arm broke. He yanked me so hard to get me out of the way that the bones just snapped. But if he hadn't— Washington sobbed openly now. They would have killed me. I know they would have killed me. Why didn't you tell the police this? Judge Morrison asked, her voice gentle but firm. Because I was ashamed, Washington cried. Ashamed that I let fear make me lie. When the police came, Mr. Kinley was unconscious. Those boys had beaten him with a pipe after he fought them off. I was hurt and scared, and when they asked what happened, I took the easy way out. I blamed the homeless man. I figured no one would believe him anyway. The revelation hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Several of the standing veterans sat down heavily, while others remained on their feet, their respect for James now tinged with something deeper, a recognition of sacrifice without reward, heroism without recognition. Chen turned to James. Mr. Kinley, is this true? James looked up for only the second time since entering the courtroom. His eyes found Washington's, and something passed between them. Forgiveness, understanding, The weight of shared survival. It doesn't matter if it's true, son. What matters is that Mr. Washington is safe. It matters to me, Judge Morrison said firmly. Mr. Washington, are you saying that Mr. Kinley saved your life? Washington nodded through his tears. Yes, ma'am, he saved my life and I repaid him by trying to destroy his. The judge looked at Ada Wells, who was frantically whispering with her assistant. Counselor, does the state wish to continue with this prosecution? Wells stood slowly, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Your Honor, in light of this new testimony, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Kinley. Motion granted. Judge Morrison's gavel fell with finality. Mr. Kinley, you are free to go. But James didn't move. He sat in his chair staring at his shackled hands as if they belonged to someone else. Your Honor, Officer Reeves called from the gallery. If I may? Judge Morrison nodded. Reeves approached the defendant's table and knelt beside James's chair. Hey, Sarge, remember me? Danny Reeves, 2nd Platoon. You carried me 2 miles after that IED took out our convoy. Doctors said I wouldn't walk again, but here I am. He gestured to his police uniform. Made it through the academy, got married, got kids now, all because of you. James finally looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. Danny. Jesus, kid, you got old. Reeves laughed, tears streaming down his face. Look who's talking, old man. Come on, let's get you out of here. As the bailiff removed James's shackles, more voices began calling out from the gallery, stories of rescue, of sacrifice, of a man who had saved lives and asked for nothing in return. Judge Morrison listened to each one, her own eyes growing. Moist, Mr. Kinley, she said as he finally stood, his legs unsteady after hours of sitting. The court owes you an apology, and more than that, the community owes you a debt we can never repay. James shook his head. No debt, Your Honor, just doing what needed doing. Where will you go? Chen asked, his earlier nervousness replaced by genuine concern. Before James could answer, Washington stepped forward. He'll come with me, the old man said, his voice steady now, resolved. I've got a spare room above my store. It's not much, but it's warm and dry, and I make a mean pot of coffee. James looked at Washington, with something that might have been surprise. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Washington. No, Washington replied, extending his good hand. But maybe we can owe each other something. Maybe we can both do better. James took the offered hand, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, something that might have been a smile ghosted across his weathered features. As the crowd began to disperse, Judge Morrison called out one final time. Mr. Kinley, he turned back to face her. Thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for reminding us all what honor really looks like. James nodded once, then turned and walked out of the courtroom, flanked by the men whose lives he had saved, supported by the community that had almost failed him, carrying himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had always known that true heroism whispers while cowardice shouts. The late afternoon sun streamed through the courthouse windows as James Harold Kinley, decorated veteran, unsung hero, guardian angel to strangers, walked free, not because the system worked, but because sometimes, just sometimes, the truth refuses to stay buried. But as the courtroom emptied and the news crews packed up their equipment, none of them knew the most important truth of all, one that James would carry to his grave, one that explained everything and nothing about the man who saved lives as easily as other people breathed. The real James Harold Kinley had died in that IED blast in Kandahar in 2009, taking shrapnel meant for Danny Reeves. The man who walked out of that courtroom had been living under his best friend's name for 15 years, honoring the memory of the only person who had ever shown him what true heroism looked like. His real name was Michael Torres, and he had been AWOL from the Army for a decade and a half, but no one, not the VA, not the police, not even James's own family, had ever questioned why a dead man kept saving lives. By